Penguin Random House Audio presents Sidelined, Sports, Culture, and Being a Woman in America. This is the author, Julie Dicaro. For Auntie, 1908 to 2004. Introduction. Sports aren't just about sports. In this introduction, I'm supposed to tell you why I wrote this book. So let's see. I wrote it, I think, because of all the things I felt I couldn't say working in sports media, and all the times other women have whispered things to me, important things, and sworn me to secrecy, and then checked in on me multiple times to make sure I kept my promise and didn't tell anyone. I wrote it because there are only 240 characters in a tweet, and every time a troll rolls up on me, I have to weigh my mental health against the burning desire to tell him off. And because there are never enough characters in the world to say all the things I want to say. No one should have as many bad days as women who work in media do. I wrote it because working in sports talk radio in many ways is like working in a frat house. But you can't say that, not publicly, unless you want everyone at work to be furious with you. I wrote it for all the women in sports and sports media, as well as for all the women who work in male-dominated industries, who go to work every day and have to bite their tongues and swallow their cutting retorts to the men around them because, knowing what I know, they have every right to let those retorts fly. I wrote it for the woman on Twitter who told me that I seem to see everything through the lens of sexual discrimination. Because yes, that will happen when you work in an industry with almost no women that is actually rife with sexual discrimination. Sometimes you're a hammer and everything actually is a nail. Mostly, though, I wrote it because I realized somewhere around year 2 of my 6 years working in sports media that whatever issues women have in society in general, they're amplified by a factor of about 1 million in sports. Women who work in the industry swim in a toxic stew of gender inequality. Often, it seems as if no one cares. As such, this is a book about sports that's not really about sports. It's about women. Sports is merely the lens through which we'll look at the problems that permeate being a woman in the United States and likely everywhere else in the world. We'll talk about Serena Williams crying at work, but we've all cried at work before, right? We'll talk about the history of sexual harassment at ESPN, but we'll do so knowing that the worldwide leader in sports is far from the only corporation where gender harassment is said to be endemic. We'll talk about how men, and other women, contribute to a culture of white male supremacy, knowing that it's an issue in every industry in America and likely beyond. Sports radio is a bizarre industry. It sounds like the best job in the world. And I'll give you this, it beats spending the morning trying to control your client in divorce court. But it's populated by some of the meanest and most miserable people, men, I've ever met. People who love radio really, really love radio, and I really did. But there's something about the off hours, the deluge of people calling or texting in to yell at you all the time, the backbiting and competitiveness of it that makes people hard and cynical and sometimes nasty. It's also an industry where you can listen all day and never hear a woman's voice, maybe not even in commercials. When I fell ass backward into my first radio job after practicing law for more than 10 years, I couldn't believe it had actually happened. I'd been raised on Chicago's WGN radio during its golden years, listening to Uncle Bobby Collins on the way to school with my dad and catching the end of Spike O'Dell on my way home from soccer or gymnastics practice. I went into radio feeling like the luckiest woman on the planet, but I left feeling disillusioned and sad. And yet, I missed my microphone and my weeknight show terribly. I didn't want to leave the industry. I just wanted the industry to grow the fuck up. Even though many radio stations have beat reporters on staff, it exists in a weird place where sales rule. As such, there's not much editorial freedom. The station can shut down a story just because they don't want to upset an important team or client. In a tough media climate with mass layoffs lurking around seemingly every corner, I found myself always looking over my shoulder and obsessing about making a mistake. Focused like a laser on not saying the wrong thing. And yet I always seemed to find the wrong thing to say. Those wrong things were nearly always social justice issues, talking about Colin Kaepernick or violence against women or racial injustice. Yet those were the things that made sports interesting to me. the interplay between political tensions in our society. But those same issues brought down a world of hurt on me, both online and in my career. There are so many obstacles for women in sports radio to navigate, but by and large, we navigate them alone. Radio is a sink-or-swim business, meaning there's no real formal training. Sure, you might do a bunch of score updates or work in the producer's booth, but there's not really much to prepare you for the first time you host a show, especially if you don't have a co-host. And while I'm sure it's also a daunting task for men, there's a whole extra level of toxicity for women to learn to handle. In some ways, the sports media industry shows us what America might look like if we'd never passed Title VII or the Equal Pay Act. If those who did the hiring were simply left to their own devices, relying on the old trope of hiring the best candidate no matter what race, gender, or creed. Except, as in every other industry, the best candidate almost always turns out to be white and male. Sports talk radio is one of the least diverse fields in media. More on that later. And it's only getting worse. Recently, there's been a push in sports for men to disclose their salaries with their female colleagues, if they have any, in order for women to assess if they're being underpaid. We are. And by how much? A lot. I never had the guts to ask any of my male colleagues what they earned, but I made $25 an hour as an update anchor and got bumped up to $50 an hour when I began hosting my show. This is where you picture me swimming through piles of money like Scrooge McDuck. That might sound like a decent salary, but my show was only on 2 hours every night. By the time I drove to the city, I got off at midnight, parked and got a drink or snacks for the show, I was making around $75 a night. I can't prove it, but while I worked on an hourly basis with no benefits, I'm certain most of the male hosts at my station had multi-year contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not only the U.S. women's national soccer team and the WNBA players fighting for equal pay for equal work. When the global pandemic claimed my job, a group of women who had also been laid off by my employer reached out to me to share stories. That led to me talking to several attorneys, all of whom were appalled by the lack of women working full-time in radio at my station's parent corporation, Entercom. I was far from the only woman who had run smack into a brick wall, unable to rise above a part-time after-hours show. I was advised to go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, but I decided not to. Going to the EEOC would have meant the start of legal action, which likely would have ended with a settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. I couldn't risk having to sign an NDA when I had so much to say. So I agreed not to sue the company, took my paltry severance, and decided to work through my feelings in this book. Though stick to sports is the current rallying cry to silence those who see sports as a means to achieving social justice, sports have always been a microcosm of society and a lens through which to view gender inequality. From gold medalist Aly Raisman to world champion Serena Williams, to broadcasters Jessica Mendoza and Beth Mowins, women are waging battles for fairness on the field, in the booth, and in the stands. Truth be told, there still aren't many places where women in sports can speak honestly about unfair treatment, sexual harassment, social justice issues, and the fight to make it in an industry still dominated and controlled by men. In fact, women in sports just aren't asked about these topics all that often, and when the issues are raised, their responses are often taken out of context and presented in isolation. While every woman in the sports world has a different experience, many of their stories overlap and intersect in profound ways. It's time to take a holistic look at how the sports world treats women and how high-profile women in the industry are fighting to level the playing field. As the world continues to struggle with the implications of unequal wages, violence against women, and the fallout of Me Too, the world of sports, as always, is leading the charge in forcing Main Street USA to take a good long look at how women are treated in today's society, on and off the field. During my time as a sports radio host and in my current career as a journalist, I've had a front row seat to the sexism and misogyny that pervade amateur, college, and pro sports and the media that covers them. I'm grateful to every single woman who talked to me for this book, some on the record, some off. The truth is, many of the women who spoke to me did so knowing they'll suffer harassment or blowback from current and former colleagues. And while I would never purport to speak for all women, this is the story of many women, as well as my own. Chapter 1. Behold, Smashers.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?